Get the mic going. There we go. All right. Can we believe what one Big Ten athletic director said? Because I will tell you this much. I could not. And I really wanted to be able to do a live show last night to talk about this. I'm making room today to talk about this because I was pretty floored, honestly. And I think it leaves you to wonder what exactly the motivations are here. But Nebraska's athletic director was speaking to a group of donors and speaking about the money that will potentially be needed for the next 2 years to compete for Nebraska. But that 2 years is an important distinction because he seems to believe that in 2 years, there won't be quite as much need for that level of competing or competition because it will be a more even playing field after that. For a Big Ten athletic director to be making that statement, I was pretty stunned and shocked. And if you're a Big 12 fan, that would likely be music to your ears, right? Hey, in a couple of years, if revenue sharing is going to even the playing field, that's great. Sign me up. I have a very hard time believing that. There are a number of reasons for that. And I just am still a little flabbergasted that this happened. Maybe Nebraska needs to do a double take on who exactly they hired as their athletic director, though I know the track record at Washington would certainly suggest that some good things happened there. But I want to discuss that. Is there anything based in reality on this, that the gap will be closed because of revenue sharing? It was a Football Scoop article. Those guys are really plugged in typically to what happens with the coaching community and coaching searches. But this was from what I think was not necessarily supposed to be an overly public, hit the airwaves sort of a conversation, perhaps a more candid conversation between the Nebraska athletic director and some donors about what happens once revenue sharing hits. And we're going to talk about it. I will give you the quote. We're going to talk about it in the show today. And as a part of a bigger picture here and being able to legitimately compete, I also want to raise a question that has not been raised yet on this show, and that is in light of some of what has happened recently with NCAA rulings, because it seems like so much is coming at us, right? We've had to deal with not only what's going on in the lawsuits in the ACC, but the House case and the settlement and what's happening there, and when will it actually be approved, even if the schools have approved it for now. You're having to keep track of so many things. But one of the things that has slipped in there is that you're going to be seeing more advertising in and around college football fields starting this season. That is a way to generate more revenue, to hit that revenue sharing mark that I just brought up, that I just mentioned there. So if that's the case, if that is one way to become a little bit more even on the revenue sharing front, to draw in extra streams of revenue, are you willing to let the Big 12 basically turn into NASCAR, right? Have ads sold everywhere to be able to have a better chance to compete. I know it may seem silly, hey, winning cures all. If you're winning, who really cares what you look like? But are we fully prepared for the sport in general, but particularly as Big 12 fans, which would be a group of schools that definitely need to find every single nook and cranny they can to get as much revenue as they possibly can, as Brett Yormark pushes everybody in the conference right now to invest more and more in athletics, like we saw he did to the Arizona Board of Regents just the other day. Are you prepared for that? Have we fully equipped ourselves for that to be the reality in a couple of years? Because right now it's on-field logos, which is one thing, but that could become more pretty quickly. There are also details on just how much money your school could be making by selling off its naming rights, and even a very, very bold prediction from John Wilner on where that will ultimately lead as far as the sponsorships go. And it would basically be taking it to its logical end game if you start to follow it down that road. We can also take a minute to pour one out for the Pac-12 again, I suppose, today, because Oregon State lost in the College World Series. Congratulations, I suppose, to Kentucky. You've got all SEC and all ACC in the College World Series. But that means that competition for the Pac-12 is officially done. There will be no more Pac-12 competition. Okay, that is it. Finale, donezo. We can pour one out once again for the Pac-12. We basically already did that, right? And we made our George Kliavkoff jokes and, not done shopping, all those comments. I'm here to do it again today, though. If you guys would like to, you can certainly bring some of your Pac-12 quips. I do want to play a little more off of what John Wilner said, something he said in his mailbag, which was a very interesting conference realignment scenario. And I bring this up because, look, John Wilner is somebody that, as you guys know, and sometimes you guys got annoyed with me when I was saying this all through last year, like I do very much respect John Wilner, and I think he's an excellent college football reporter, right? If he says this, I do listen. I'm not saying I think this is likely to happen, but it was a realignment scenario that I'm listening to, and it's the Big Ten, potentially a marriage between the Big Ten and two schools that we just don't ever talk about with the Big Ten right now. This is a far cry from a Florida State or a Clemson. So we do have realignment hypotheticals, everybody's favorite, but you know me, I'm not going to do it just from the totally random guy out there on the internet. This is a John Wilner realignment hypothetical. So a little bit of everything here on the show today. I hope you guys survived without me yesterday. I tried to make sure I got you still some content. And I do think that Brett Yormark piece is of note on a couple of fronts. If you didn't check out that video, make sure and go check it out as soon as we are done here. But Brett Yormark is being very intentional, seemingly, about leading everybody in the direction of like, hey, now is the time. Like, this is not the time to be sitting out investing in college athletics. Like, as a conference, we've got to invest, and particularly invest in football, and we've got to do it right now. Like, that needs to happen. So he did that with the Arizona Board of Regents. He was also, again, asked about potential expansion and still was pretty transparent about his ultimate aspirations there. Like, yes, we will certainly look at that. Even though he has said that like now is not an active time that they're looking at it, he wants to be able to present everybody in the Big 12 with options. So they're open. It's basically still an extenuation. He's extending the open for business comment, right? And I love that Yormark doesn't shy away from doing that. That strategy worked once. He seems to be continuing to roll with that again. If you guys have something else, though, you know how to be a part of the show. Even if you just want to comment on anything that was mentioned there, you are more than welcome to become part of the show by clicking the $ below the chat box. We'll attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, which ensures that you get on the program tonight and is a way to make your voice be heard, share your opinions, be a part of the show, and support the work that I'm doing to bring you this Big 12 conference realignment, college football content on a week in, week out basis here on the channel. So I greatly appreciate all of you who do that. Couldn't do it without you, but also couldn't do it without all of you guys who are so kind as to just give the video a like. Totally free way to support the channel. Just one click, give me a like, and that helps me out with the YouTube algorithm as well. So do the comments underneath the video. And if you are not catching this video live, you can submit a question or comment via your donation on Venmo. It is John-Kurtz-4 in order to do that. And those, as always, are much, much, much appreciated as well. I will kick off the next show with your question or comment from Venmo if you do send it that way. So you can still very much be a part of everything that is going on here and be a part of the conversation. John Kurtz Show. Make sure and give me a follow on the TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. It's John Kurtz Show there, and it's at JL Kurtz on Twitter. Okay, so the Nebraska athletic director, I don't know if would I say this is speaking out of turn? Maybe that's not totally fair here, but I wonder what the true motivations are behind this. Let me see. Football Scoop. I lost my specific article here, so my apologies. Give me 1 second. Because I wanted to make note of where this is specifically being said. Okay, so he was talking to the 1890 Initiative, which is the collective supporting Nebraska's NIL efforts. My apologies there. I couldn't remember the name of that. So this is Troy Dannon. He's the new Nebraska AD. He was at Washington. Speaking to the 1890 Initiative, the collective supporting Nebraska's NIL efforts, Dannon laid out how he thinks the next 2 years in college athletics will play out in light of the House versus NCAA settlement working its way through the legal system. So there's a lot to digest here because in one breath, like one thing that he does say is that he thinks collectives are just going away, that like collectives will be gone. They will not be a thing. So, quote, let me tell you something about NIL. It's not going to last forever. Here's what I think is going to happen, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. There will be an antitrust settlement this year in the courts. Part of that settlement, 1890, which is their collective, is going to get banned. Going to get banned. The collectives are going to go away. What's going to be replaced is athletic departments, revenue sharing with our athletes. In the budget of our athletic department right now, we have a $20 million placeholder in 2 years to share money with our athletes. It's in the budget right now. This came from, by the way, let me give credit here. TikTok account 247.Huskers is the one that published this video. And apparently the remarks actually occurred in April and they are just now surfacing. But again, I think the fact that this is a little bit more of a candid conversation here between basically athletic director and donors that he knows he is going to need to step up to fuel the program in the current era that we are in. So you're going to get either a more honest conversation or really have to dig through what the motives are. You can see that there would be different motives at play here than something you would be saying publicly. So he's already said collectives are going to be banned. This collective that we have that I'm talking to all of you guys about, the 1890 collective, it's going away. That's one pretty bold statement because I don't think collectives are going away. I think they will change shape. I've already heard some conversations about how it's going to change to where the collectives become just like an official marketing agency of the school, more or less, is kind of a way that they seem to be positioning themselves now. So wouldn't think it'd be accurate to say collectives are going away. Now, I also understand that these comments were made in April, but I don't think all of this still seemed pretty obvious to me at that point in time. It did not seem like this would be something that would be totally going away. Anyway, here's more of the comments from Dan, and he said, quote, "We've got great advantages here. We don't have debt. We have great reserves. We have a fan base, facilities. We have great advantages to addressing what lies ahead." I wouldn't disagree with him there. Nebraska's in pretty good shape. He says, let's talk about what happens in the next 2 years. NIL's not coming in-house. It's going to be replaced by something else. At Washington, and NIL's not coming in-house. It's going to be replaced by something else. At Washington, our football program last year had an NIL budget of about $10 million, and we went to the national championship game. Oregon's is 23. 23. He also says Ohio State's is 20. And he then points out ours here at Nebraska is not even 10. 23. So that's big comment number 2. First, he says collectives are going away. Second, he's making the claims that Oregon and Ohio State each have a $23 million NIL budget for football alone. For football alone. Like, I was kind of under the impression that, you needed less than that, probably 25 to 30% less than that combined between football and basketball to be pretty competitive. That was really where I was operating under the assumption of before seeing that. 23 million is crazy. Just a couple of years ago, Ryan Day said, he had the comment where he said it would be like $13 million to maintain a competitive football roster. Apparently, that has really gone up here, if you believe Nebraska AD Troy Dannon. So that part of it screams, this is a guy talking to his donors. This is a guy talking to his collective, and this is a guy talking to his donors. Screams that. Of course, that's what you would say. Whether or not he's exaggerating on what Oregon's number is, what Ohio State's number is, it doesn't matter. He's going to use that for effect. If it was just more rumor, something he heard offhand from somebody, whatever it might be, that's exactly what you tell your donors. You scare them. Hey, I went to the national championship last year with 10, but that was a low number. You guys aren't even at 10 right now. Those are rookie numbers. Got to get those up. To quote my favorite movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. That's basically what Dannon was saying about that, which that can be a whole other discussion, whether or not Ohio State and Oregon are actually pumping that kind of money into it. The other significance of the 23 number is that the revenue sharing number is supposed to be 22. And what Dannon is saying is, look, Oregon and Ohio State are already past that. They're already past that with what they're giving here. But this is the part that I really want to focus on, is what he says next. He says, quote, "We have the facilities, we have the coaches, we have the fans. In the next couple years, we'll be fighting an even fight. Right now, we're not fighting an even fight." So what he is saying there in the next couple of years we'll be fighting an even fight is that revenue sharing will come in, make this number 22, and then everybody has to abide by that. And no longer can Oregon and Ohio State throw out their numbers that are like 2.5 times what we're doing here at Nebraska in terms of what they're divvying up for their football program NIL wise. It will be an even playing field, even fight. I'll say even fight. He's not saying playing field, even fight, which seems very much the same to me, but in fairness to him, we'll be fighting an even fight. I can't believe that a Big Ten athletic director would be making that statement. So I have to start going into like, what are the motivations? And let me just push that off for 1 second. But this should be the type of thing that, like, as a Big 12 centric guy, Big 12 fan, I would be latching on to like, oh, hell yes. Here's a Big Ten athletic director saying that the gap is shrinking. Like, no longer will the SEC and I guess the powers that be in the Big Ten have this crazy lead out over everybody financially because we finally got those guardrails, right? This seems like a guy who's been screaming about guardrails and is like, hell yeah, brothers, we finally got our guardrails. Okay, brothers and sisters, my apologies. Brothers and sisters, we finally have our NIL guardrails here that's going to make this an even fight. But like, I can't in good faith, like, sell you that in front of this camera. I can't in good faith tell you that that's something that I would legitimately latch on to and believe, because it just seems ludicrous. Like, we all kind of know the deal now, right? We all understand what's going on, that they're going to find a way to still be able to pay athletes outside of this. Even, I mean, if we go back a couple of weeks, even the attorneys, the plaintiff attorneys in the House case, there was a quote from one of those two guys that just said, hey, I imagine that alums are going to continue to like fervently support their school and they will find a way to do that financially or whatever it's going to be, basically insinuating like, yeah, there will be something. There will be something that's going to keep more money coming than just the revenue sharing, because a piece of the revenue sharing likely what will go to other sports, and then how much of it is going to have to go to women's sports based on Title IX, very much up for interpretation. Still a lot that has to be sorted out with that, but you may lose a decent chunk of it there too. You're not telling me that like Ohio State's at 23 million already right now, and they're going to have to legitimately like have their football number to be able to make the Title IX portion of it work and the other sports work, and like that's it. And they'll just have to stop them there. In what world that makes sense? I don't know. Football Scoop puts it pretty well here. They say, if I'm a prospective 1890 donor hearing Dan say all of this, I can't believe my good fortune. You mean to tell me collectives like this will suddenly become illegal? All the money to Ohio State, Oregon, and others that they're currently using to tilt the playing field in their direction will go away? Teams will no longer be allowed to money whip players, and best of all the money Nebraska needs to fund the payroll it already has? Where do I sign up? And so now I think, we start to get into the motivations here of what is being done by Troy Dannon in saying this, right? It's the rallying cry for the donors. Like, hey, bolster it up right now. Get us the money for the next 2 years, because it's going to be crazy still until we get this all ready to go. So for the next 2 years, pony up, and then we can take some of the stress off. Okay. At that point, you won't be as pressed. You won't be as stressed to be helping us in this fight for college athletics and college football survival. But he's right. That whole message sounds just too good to be true. It is also, let me just interject. Let me intersperse this comment. If I may take one teeny little shot here at Nebraska, that would just be that it is funny that this message is coming from Nebraska, who would pride itself on being one of the biggest brands in college football, one of the best programs in college football, and also a program that is not going to struggle with money, and would look down upon Big 12 fan bases. We certainly see it on Twitter, which I know is not real life, but would look down upon Big 12 fan bases for not being as up to speed monetarily as everybody else in the Power 2 conferences. And here it is, Nebraska basically having to preach that message. Like, this would seem to be the message from like a Big 12 athletic director, right? This would seem to be the message from a Big 12 AD trying to say, hey, hang tight, guys. It'll be okay. This sounds more like Jamie Pollard, Gene Taylor, something one of those guys would have to say, Chad Weiberg, to their constituents, aka donors, right now to get them fully on board with everything. Football Scoop says there's a great unanswered question that leads me to believe the future Dan prophesized is too good to be true from Nebraska's perspective, and that is, how exactly are we ensuring that collectives will soon become illegal? What police force out there is going to enforce that players make $20 million and only $20 million? Yeah, I mean, essentially they boil that down to that point, which is a completely accurate one to bring up here. The NCAA is becoming more and more neutered by the day. There are potential lawsuits that could come in if you are going to stop the money being made from then. I guess some of this would depend too on like whether you get some sort of congressional codification of this stuff, which they're lobbying for and very much want. There are some factors that could play into that, but you would still be asking for trouble if you are legitimately just going to cap it at the rev share number. You're legitimately asking for trouble there. There's no way that this will just stop. And even if it's, hey, we're trying to put our foot down with that, people have been cheating the system and gaming the system and finding ways to make that work for a long time. And once they start to do that, then it'll be like whack-a-mole. You try and come over this tactic that they're using to skirt the system. Well, maybe they sue you on that one, and you'll probably lose because we've seen what's happening to the NCAA in virtually every single instance there. And they still just won't go full in on saying these guys are employees. So they're probably going to continue to lose cases like that as they come up. There's just no way I see that this would be like legitimately enforceable or something that could happen. The article says, remember the $23 million Ohio State and Oregon reportedly pay is just for the football team. No one's quite sure how the $20 million payments closer to $22 million will break out, but chances are it will have to be split. We talked about that. And then this thrown in by Football Scoop, which I can confirm. I can very much confirm this. I don't always come to you guys with like, hey, I've got all this inside info. And not that this is some groundbreaking scoop, but I can confirm this is accurate. Anticipating all this, some collectives are already preparing to pivot into marketing agencies funded directly by the university they support to arrange legal ways to put money in their players' pockets. Quote, any effort to eliminate what's been created by collectives has a significant risk of violating antitrust laws and the protections of the Sherman Act, one executive in the collective industry told Yahoo Sports. You can be sure that we are following things closely and have a team ready to enforce the rights in court if necessary. Look, they're already preparing the lawsuits. You can hear the billable hours being filed as we speak. They're already preparing the lawsuits if that were to happen. So, unfortunately, the bottom line here is as much as what Troy Dannon at Nebraska said would be music to Big 12 fans' ears and something I would love to believe, I just can't buy it. I can't believe it. That seems like a bit of a stretch, probably told in an effort to get donors as rallied as possible and get them to like ravenously come to the table to support Nebraska football over the next couple of years and make them feel better, like they're not going to be just totally stressed. Their wallets will not be too stressed and too stretched thin over the long haul because of the current landscape of college athletics. That's the verdict here. That is the verdict here. But I was pretty stunned to see that even in April, that was a comment being made by a guy at a Big Ten athletic department. And one that would consider itself to be fairly powerful in the Nebraska Cornhuskers as well at that. So anyway, don't get any of that twisted. Don't get your hopes up too much would be the message there, kids. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that, it's all going to hell, but I don't think that's the magic bullet. I don't think revenue sharing is the magic bullet to make everything just back to at least a relatively stable parity sort of competitive ground in college football. It's never been that way. We know that the big brands have always had huge advantages in one way or another. You guys get the point. I don't think it's anything that is going to shrink the gap that now financially has become wider than it has ever been. Okay, Cat Fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. What is up, Daniel? Appreciate you, my man. Thank you for popping in today. Daniel says, congrats to Virginia. Instead of going to Omaha for the College World Series, Barbara and I will be going to KC to see the Royals tomorrow. Hopefully the Cats will be able to go to Omaha next year. Go Royals and go Cats. Well, very gracious, Daniel. Very gracious in defeat there. Yeah, it was a frustrating weekend. K-State losing 2 games to Virginia on the road. So they go down in the supers. Not a good weekend for the Big 12. West Virginia also lost Randy Mazey. Congrats to him on a great career, as his career is now done, stepping away, retiring at West Virginia. That guy did incredible work with the Mountaineers. And now we've got an all ACC, SEC College World Series, which I'm sure everybody here is thrilled about. That'll be awesome. The rich get richer there. But yeah, hope you guys have a great time at the Royals game. I was at the Royals game the other night for K-State Day at the K, actually on Friday, when Bobby Witt had that game-tying triple in the comeback win. They fell behind 7-0 in the first inning. And I was getting rained on, and we almost left. But you know what? We stuck around, and it turned into a great comeback. So anyway, there's a lesson for you. Daniel, hopefully you guys stick it out and stay the entire game. But I hope you have a great time, and I really, really appreciate you supporting the channel. Thank you so much, my friend. If you want to be a part of the show tonight, you can do so by clicking the $ below the chat box. That is how you can attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat, and we'll pin it in a separate column for me and ensure that you make it on the show tonight. If you could like the video too, that also really helps. Would much appreciate that. And you can also, if you're not watching this live, donate on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo, to leave a question or comment there, and I will start the next show with it. All right. Basically, the headline here is, are you ready for the Big 12 to be NASCAR? Is NASCAR something that you like? Would you like NASCAR to mix with your college football? I kid, sort of, but this has been actually, that's a line. I mean, I'm stealing a line essentially from a Ross Dellinger story there, not about the Big 12 specifically, but comping what is now another thing coming in college sports to what NASCAR has done with the logos everywhere, trying to make money every single possible way that you can. We have not talked yet about the fact that the NCAA has approved on-field corporate advertisements for the upcoming season. And that is kind of the gateway drug here to just going full bore on all of this. You can't do, as of right now, you can't do the uniforms. We're not doing that yet. You can't, I don't think you could do like the entire stadium, right? Just make it completely, I guess maybe the stadium thing's already there, right? Because you got like Jones AT&T Stadium. So, the stadium piece, I guess, could definitely be there too. But then on top of that, like thinking like midfield logos, is somebody going to go bold enough to be a midfield logo? And John Wilner, who I'm going to get to in just a minute, suggests that even it could be like taking out the school name and just going down that road within the next 10 years. Like, how far is all of this going to go into NASCAR land just to pull in different revenue streams now that you're having to revenue share with the athletes? Because the problem here is that Greg Sankey, one thing I will actually agree with him on, is that Greg Sankey said, we don't have a revenue problem in college athletics. Like, basically, we have it. Did he call it a spending problem? We have an expenses problem. Basically, because you haven't had to revenue share with the athletes, you've used all this excess money to create quite the long list of payroll of people that you got to pay, and analysts and people in the department, and expenses that have probably gotten a bit frivolous here over the years. And now you're sitting here like, well, we need to keep all this up, and we also can't let the revenue sharing piece drop because we need to be competitive and we need the players to be competitive. And so they're now looking at like, well, what do we do to bring in the extra money? And for the players, honestly, maybe they won't love the logos on the field or wearing the uniform or whatever, but the players will probably be looking at this like, well, hey, this isn't the worst thing in the world, because the more money they make, the more revenue they have to try and cover all this, the more our cut goes up, because it's all about percentages and there are look-ins on when that increase is going to happen. So once again, the more that is pulled in here by all these athletic departments, the more it actually goes up for the players in their pockets as well. Let me read you a little bit from John Wilner. He says, how soon until the stadiums are renamed? How much cash would Washington require to change Husky Stadium to Amazon Stadium? The NCAA would have to approve that step, just as it approved the on-field logos. But the NCAA is ultimately run by the schools, and the schools always need more revenue. Which brings us to the most significant corporate leap of all. How soon until the schools sell the naming rights to their athletic departments? Once again, I will preface this with, like, I'm not one to get into like just crazy conspiracy theories from just anybody. And this is not a conspiracy theory, so maybe strike that from the record. What I am here to do is give you things from people that I think are legitimate and you should like know and trust a little bit. And John Wilner is raising the question, which frankly, if you are just looking at the path college athletics is on, the scenario I outlined, way too big of a payroll, too many expenses. Now everything's coming back around because you're going to have to disperse this $20+ million a year back to the student athletes like you should have been doing all along. You're going to be desperate for cash. So does that mean that you sell the naming rights to your athletic departments? This is John Wilner speaking here. When will the University of Washington Huskies become the Starbucks Huskies? Like, that's what he's talking about here. The Starbucks Huskies. And we could come up with some funny ones in the Big 12, right? I mean, somebody's got to be like, the Quick Trip Cats. Actually has a nice ring to it. Maybe the Quick Trip Cats. The Loves Cowboys, like Oklahoma State just goes with Loves. Every single school could just ink the deal with the most popular regional gas station chain in their area, Tri-County area, whatever it might be. The Casey's Cyclones, the Hy-Vee Cyclones, something like that. Like, that would be the move, right? Hy-Vee sells gas. That could still be the gas station conference, the truck stop conference. Everybody just do that and play right into the stereotype. Wilner says it's coming, folks. Again, this is right after the line. When will the University of Washington Huskies become the Starbucks Huskies? He follows it up with, it's coming, folks. It might take a few years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, but it's coming. So he thinks this is coming. Like, John Wilner thinks eventually the athletic departments will give out their naming rights, which at that point, like, what are we really doing at that point? What would be the point of cloaking any of this in amateurism if it's the Starbucks Huskies at the University of Washington or whatever it might be? Like, what, and then you're going to be in just a white cup jersey, I mean, like, why at that point even bother with any of this? Well, you would be doing it for the money, quite obviously here, and needing more money to revenue share with players. And there is a substantial amount of money that could come from all of this. We're going back now to the only part that we have for right now, which is just logos that could be on the field, which can be like at the 25s or midfield, I believe was I read that. I'm sorry. I don't have the official copy from the story that I was looking at there, but the 25s, I would say, is where you're probably going to start to really see this. But the logos could be worth at least $3.8 million to $4.2 million a year for top level schools in the Power Four conferences, according to a USA Today report, which is based on revenue estimates from Navigate, a sports sponsorship and valuation firm. Okay, long ways to get to Navigate, a research firm, sports sponsorship and valuation firm, says that it could be worth basically like $4 million. And if you're telling schools right now that are facing this sort of a deficit where they're going to have to come up with $20 million to pay, $4 million sounds pretty great. All we've got to do is slap a couple of Quick Trip logos on the 25s. Like, yeah, sign me up. That sounds pretty easy. And then it's just slowly introducing this stuff. Like, you're getting into a slippery slope. So part of the reason that I do think this is important to talk about right now is just generally bracing yourself for like where this is all going. Like, you are going to see this. You are going to see this. I'm sure within the next 5 years, you will see logos on the uniforms, which to me, of all the stuff that we talked about here, that's maybe the part that hurts the most. If you pay attention at all to like soccer overseas, like the Premier League, I mean, they're getting new jerseys like every year, and it's because they've just, there are different sponsors all the time. That's the main thing you see on the logo is just the sponsor, as about like, I've never paid a ton of attention to it other than like a 2 or 3 year period when I was playing FIFA all the time in college. And I became a bandwagon Manchester City fan. And it's like, I can just still see like the Etihad Airways. that's all you saw on the jerseys. It was just that giant logo, and that becomes more synonymous with it than anything about the actual club. Now, look, the English Premier League, like it's the EPL, whatever, it's thriving. The Premiership, is that what I'm supposed to call it? The Premiership? It's thriving. People love it. So I'm not saying that any of this is going to like ruin the sport. I'm sure we'll still watch it. I would still watch it. I would watch the Starbucks Huskies. Okay. I would not deny that. But it is going to make it feel a little cheapened to me. I mean, I'm not going to enjoy that. I'm not going to like it. And I am just preparing myself for the reality that the Big 12 will probably be a place that has to pursue that as much as anybody, because you've got a gap to close. You've got a big gap to close. You don't want to fall further behind. You are now finding different revenue streams that are putting you behind, whether it's the TV contracts or now the college football playoff money as well. There are different ways where you are falling behind relative to your Power 2 peers there. So the fight for you is a little more intense. Now, I guess, SEC country, this may well be something that you just see swallow up the sport as a whole, because everybody is so money hungry right now. And maybe in a couple of years when this happens, you'll have more donor fatigue at some places, even in the Power 2 conferences, and they're going to be feeling it. You may have, I talked about this the other day. USC fans were really upset with their treatment with the TV schedule in the Big Ten. And so, like, the point was, hey, there are going to be a lot of fan bases that experience this reality in the Big Ten and the SEC now because it's too crowded. There are too many big brands. Everyone expects to win. Not all of them are going to, but that will drive some desperation too. Okay. If Oklahoma goes into the SEC and all of a sudden they're struggling to finish higher than like 7th or 8th, well, all of a sudden they're going to get pretty desperate to find the extra money to try and get an extra edge to compete. So very well, this could happen other places too, but it would stand to reason right now, logically, the Big 12 would be pretty close to the top of the list of that. Like, hey, we'd better explore things like this. Because as I said, Brett Yormark is literally going to the Arizona Board of Regents right now and saying, now you better invest in athletics. Like, now is the time to do this. I know you guys are having some financial struggles, but now is the time to do this. We have to buckle down. Mac Rhodes went on 365 Sports, Baylor's athletic director, and said, I know we've got basketball. That's great. We've got to get better at football. We've got to do this thing in football. We have got to remain viable as a football product. So right now, that means the Hy-Vee Cyclones may be a reality. I mean, those black uniforms that Iowa State loves, may have a big Hy-Vee logo across it. Can you do Hy-Vee in black? Maybe you can, but you should probably prepare yourself for that. And hopefully it doesn't get to the point where the jerseys are just a total NASCAR thing where it's just filled completely up with logos top to bottom. But man, when does it stop is really the point. And like, if we're at the point that we are now with college sports, I don't see what is the move that will happen. What is the force that will come in and just turn the tide on where it's at right now? It just feels like this is a crazy toothpaste out of the tube situation where there's no real turning back for now. There was one more thing here I was going to get to you. The rule change permits on-field logos for the entire season or on a game-to-game basis. Okay, well, if we want to get into the nitty-gritty here of how you can do this, if you wanted to max your potential revenue here, you could just do it game by game. There could literally be different logos on the field game by game, and you sell the bigger games for more money. Obviously, the risk there would be you're not getting just one legit revenue stream signed up for the entire season. It would be more work to get every single game, but you could do it if you want. So you can get all the gas stations. It can be Quick Trip one week. It can be Buc-ee's the next. It can be Love's the next. Whatever it is that you want to do. You could go total truck stop there and maximize your revenue by doing all of that. But I would say, Josh, I am, first of all, finely tuned. Appreciate you chiming in. Finely tuned says the K in K-State equals Coke. Yeah, there was a time when the backdrop had Coke logos on it. I don't think that it does anymore, but yes, fair enough. I can't really deny that one. That was definitely up there at one point. But Josh, if we continue to go down this road, they need to stop calling it college football. You can't take everything out of FBS level football that makes it college football and pretend it's still college football. I bring that up, Josh, because later in the mailbag, John Wilner was basically asked that same question. And the question was like, hey, at what point does college eligibility not even matter here? At what point are we saying these guys can just play? It doesn't matter their eligibility. It doesn't matter if they're like school optional, more or less. Like school literally optional. Come here, play the sport. If you want to go to school, if you want to get your education, that's fine. But we don't really care about you being academically eligible because like you're just coming here to play sports and make money, especially if football is going to break off and do its own thing. And Wilner, I believe, set the over under at that on 8 years. I believe it was 8 years was what he said for the over under on when you'll see that happen in college athletics. So what Josh kind of puts out there is really the road that we seem to be headed down. I guess I'm just in the mode of, one, enjoy what we have while it's here. Two, hope that there is some kind of force that can curb things a little bit somehow. And three, just try to embrace change and understand that I did say, hey, the English Premier League, they have all these logos. People still really like the product. But it will really make you wax nostalgic for the good old days. The good old days of college football, which in my mind peaked in like the early 2000s, probably somewhere around there. Where's Keith Jackson and a 2:30 kickoff when you need him? That's what I've got to say about all this right now. Just Keith Jackson, a 2:30 kickoff, being the pinnacle of college football, not needing to worry about anything else. That is what I wish we had. That is what I wish we had, but alas, we don't. Aloha Nate. What's up, Aloha Nate? Thank you for being here. Aloha Nate says the NBA D League got relabeled the G League because Gatorade paid for it. Chances the Big 12 changes its conference name for the right price. I think that's probably where everyone's head is going to be at here. And then once they do that, maybe Greg Sankey will steal another Brett Yormark idea, like the basketball thing, trying to go after basketball brands. And then all of a sudden you'll have the SEC renaming the conference. I'm not actually, I had forgotten. I think I maybe knew that, but I had forgotten that it was because of Gatorade that they changed it to the G League there. Yeah, look, I think that's the type of thing that would be explored. I think you would have to. I don't know how the NCAA is going to feel about that exactly. Would they be less willing to do something at a conference-wide level than they would for just a school or like, selling stuff on the field for games? I don't know, but I think that's a very fair point to bring up. It's a very fair point to bring up. Now, hit me guys in the chat with who would sponsor the Big 12. I mean, the Buc-ee's 12 does have a nice ring to it. Buc-ee's 12 does have a nice ring to it. I don't know. Buc-ee's, I think I read an article is going to come to the Kansas City area. So I guess it is creeping into Kansas. I think it was on the Kansas side. Like creeping into Kansas, maybe Missouri getting a little bit closer to Big 12 country there, but I think of it much more as being in the state of Texas. So, it covers a part of the conference. And I'm sure we could get some other sponsors in there. Old Trapper beef jerky, not a sponsor, could be, seems to be involved with the Big 12. Like they had a bunch of beef jerky out there at Big 12 Media Days last year. And so maybe it's like the Old Trapper Big 12 conference here. We shall see. The Buc-ee's 12 pack. Buc-ee's 12 pack. Okay. I mean, look, if Aloha Nate is correct, and thank you for your support of the channel, Aloha Nate. If Aloha Nate is correct with that, I mean, think of the merch partnerships that you could have there. You could have like the Buc-ee like mascot, like hanging out at the Big 12 championship game, something like that. Sponsorship things do not always have to be bad. The Pop-Tart Bowl was everybody's favorite bowl this past bowl season. That created quite the stir in college football. We all love the Pop-Tart Bowl and how they did that. So this is where I try to say, like, maybe I try to retain a shred of optimism on all this and say, maybe we'll just get some cool things like that. Maybe there will be good marketing in a lot of this and it will make it fun and still something cool for everybody, even if it's not, quite rah-rah, sis boom bah that we all would like it to be for the good old days. Okay. Another thing that I want to give to you from John Wilner here is his prediction about what may happen in conference realignment. And this is about the Big Ten. This is a Big Ten realignment scenario. And again, I don't give this to you if it's just from random internet Twitter account with 10 numbers at the end of the name. John Wilner is somebody I definitely respect, so I listen when he drops something like this. And this was a piece of his mailbag, and this is a realignment scenario that could be on down the line. We know what's going on in the ACC, right? Florida State, Clemson, both suing the ACC suing them back. Four different suits in 3 different states. North Carolina kind of hanging out on the sidelines, trying to figure out their own stuff in-house. And the ACC looks poised to implode. It certainly seems headed toward some sort of a settlement at a point with Florida State and Clemson to allow them out of the conference. North Carolina would likely follow. From there, potentially 3 more schools leaving the conference as well. What is going to happen to the ACC? John Wilner, out on the West Coast, Pac-12 hotline, he covers everything West Coast football. So he gets asked a question: what happens when the ACC crumbles? Where will Cal and Stanford go? What were they doing this entire time by deciding to jump anyway? And here is what John Wilner says. He says, honestly, there are too many scenarios to cover here, but we will offer this morsel. If the ACC crumbles, Cal and Stanford undoubtedly will attempt to join the Big Ten and create a 6-team West Coast division that makes loads of sense for fans and athletes alike. Reforming the Pac-12 or joining the Big 12 would be secondary considerations. If they aren't already lobbying Fox, which would have to fund their move into the Big Ten, they should start immediately. So I will add that that's Wilner saying if they aren't already lobbying Fox, they should start immediately. That would tell me he doesn't have like concrete info that is happening, but he is putting out there that like Cal and Stanford's move at that point would be to try and fall up. I mean, that's the crazy thing about this scenario. That would be Cal and Stanford like failing upward. Hey, the Pac-12 failed. The Big Ten didn't really want us. They took Oregon and Washington instead. So let's go to the ACC, do this thing that makes absolutely no sense in a conference that's already falling apart. And the teams that want to leave were trying to keep us out of the league anyway. They're furious that we're here. But yet we're still going to try and ramrod this thing through. We're going to take our chances in this conference for a little while. And then once it implodes, maybe then the Big Ten will be ready to take us in. Maybe then the Big Ten will be ready to take in mighty Cal football and whatever Stanford is these days as a football product. At least Stanford, I have a little more familiarity with because of that Colorado game last year, right? They went and beat Colorado in thrilling fashion. So I've got that. Cal, I legitimately don't know if Cal has played a football game in 10 years. You could tell me that they haven't. And if a college football program falls in the woods and no one's around to see it, did it actually fall? That's where we're at with Cal football here. That seems crazy to me, especially as we do start to talk more about, when Greg Flugar brought up the potential Kansas connection to the SEC because the SEC would be looking for basketball brands, and that Brett Yormark has already sort of introduced this idea to everybody that, hey, maybe there is more value in basketball than we've all let on here. And we're getting close to being pretty saturated with the football brands in these big major conferences. And with the USC fans of the world already complaining about getting like 7th billing in the Big Ten, you're going to have more programs that are looking around in a couple of years like, hey, do we really need to be inviting like more good football teams and brands into this conference? It's already pretty freaking hard enough. We don't need that. We need some teams that will be a little bit more beatable and, maybe just provide us some basketball value. And we start to max out other pieces of that. That would seem to tell me that like Cal and Stanford just would still not be that attractive. I mean, the attractive part of Cal and Stanford is everything that was like the old school way of thinking about realignment. I don't mean this as like an attack because I think a lot of this was pretty well thought out. And obviously there were really good PowerPoints and data early on in this, but it's kind of like the Tony Altimore like theory on realignment, right? That like you don't want to upset all these academic connections that you have. And like, it's like academics in Olympic sports. That's what you get with Cal and Stanford. I don't think that has the value that like a big basketball brand like a Kansas would, like in the SEC scenario that was laid out there by Greg. That's different. That to me has much more tangible value than just getting the like academic prestige and making your presidents happy by going and taking a Cal and Stanford. That being said, right, that's my logic. John Wilner is saying this from an informed perspective. Okay, so that's why I bring it to you, because I would trust that is something that he has likely heard. If he's going to write it like that, like that's where Cal and Stanford's head would be at. And I suppose honestly, like don't hate the player, hate the game kind of a thing. If they're gonna shoot their shot, you might as well shoot or shoot. If the ACC implodes, we'll try to go back to somebody that we at least know. Like, I think they probably feel like the Big Ten at least has some sentimental attachment to Cal and Stanford there because of everything I just outlined. It may not be the reality, but there's probably some sentimental attachment. Like, it kind of feels to me like someone you dated back in high school, and it's like, hey, I've still got some love for you. Like, obviously we had something back then, but like just times have changed, man. Like I'm 28 now. All right, we're not 16 anymore in high school, so that but Cal is gonna go make a run at it. Stanford is gonna go make a run at it. That to me would feel like what that scenario is. So whether or not that would work, that's not what John Wilner is saying. He is saying that Cal and Stanford would definitely try. I'm reading through some of the rest of the answer here. There's a case to be made that Cal and Stanford abandoned the Titanic only to take refuge aboard the Lusitania. Florida State and Clemson leaving at some point, the ACC doomed as a result. Would the remaining ACC schools seek to merge with the Big 12? Could they create their own league? Could they somehow join forces with the Big East in basketball? Or might the dissolution of the ACC spark a breakup of the power conference structure and lead to the formation of a super league? All of those things I do think are things that could be explored or could happen. And Wilner basically said, look, there's too much to try and predict here. This is what I can tell you. They would try to join the Big Ten. I think he's right about the scenarios. Like, it's too hard to try and pinpoint where things would be at when that would happen, as opposed in terms of how everything could go here. And he also mentioned like joining the Big 12, reforming the Pac-12, or joining the Big 12 would be secondary considerations. I would not expect for a second that Cal and Stanford would waste a microsecond thinking about the Big 12. And I really don't know why the Big 12 would spend much time thinking about them. I guess, again, pending how far down the road this is, what their athletic successes looked like in the ACC. But based on what seems to be the trajectory right now, I don't know why you would waste much time thinking about it if you're the Big 12. I'm not sure exactly what you're really gaining there. You're not getting football, basketball. This conference is not having Cal and Stanford is not going to boost the reputation of the league enough academically to move the needle for you on anything that really truly matters here. We're moving toward a world where John Wilner said in like 8 years, it may be the Starbucks Huskies instead of the Washington Huskies running around out there, and eligibility doesn't even matter. You're just taking hired guns and having them play for your football team. So like, why would you care then about Cal and Stanford? Like, what value are they really going to have? Which is a point toward the Big Ten thing again. Like, why would the Big Ten take them if that's the world that we're moving toward, right? Things have changed. Not 16 and in high school anymore. 28, you got a mortgage and a kid. Much different life than the life that you were living at 16 there. Our web, not that I'm a Cal defender, but, I'm sorry, Cyclone Steve, I missed you. Cyclone Steve, I'll get to you in just 1 second. My apologies. Our web, not that I'm a Cal defender, but they played Tech in the Independence Bowl last year, and Jaden Ott is fire as a running back. Jaden Ott is very good. I will give you that. But I'll be honest, like outside of that, I know virtually nothing. And I know about Jaden Ott just because of watching. I think Josh Pate, I think maybe was talking about Jaden Ott the other day, and I was like, oh, okay, this guy seems pretty good. I guess Cal does have a really good running back. Cal fans, I'm sorry. I don't know if they exist on the internet anyway to really come after me. I feel like that's a pretty safe school and fan base to take a pot shot at here or there. It's a pretty irrelevant football program. And then you couple that with like the West Coast and playing some later games. And I have not watched much Cal football. Aaron Rodgers is interesting, I guess. So you got that. You got that, Cal. I like Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch is fun. He's great. R-Web sticking up for Cal. Appreciate you, R-Web. Cyclone Steve, will we get ACC sloppy seconds or do they survive? I think the hope would be, and the best case scenario for the Big 12 would be that, yes, you do get your pick of the sloppy seconds litter and you take over as like the catch-all number 3 power conference out there, and then it's the power 2, and then you with like everybody else, and you've got the best of the rest. That's probably the best case scenario for the Big 12. But I do think I've heard enough now from, Andrew Carter, who was on the other day, who's from ACC country. Wilner now mentioning like, hey, you could try to repurpose some version of the ACC. I think that possibility would exist that they would try and do something, even if it's like the kind of Ivy League light version that is based more around academics. But there's still a possibility that they could exist. But whether or not that would actually be considered like a legitimate power conference at that point, I think is a much different question. So I'd say it's up in the air, but I definitely do think there's a chance that the Big 12 would pick up some of the sloppy seconds. And I will put it this way too, Cyclone Steve. There was a lot of doubt about Brett Yormark's ability to do that with the Pac-12. Came from a lot of Pac-12 media sources. And at the end of the day, Brett Yormark pulled it off. Like, it did work out like that. They got the sloppy seconds of the Pac-12. So they've done it once. I very much think they could do it again. But there are too many variables to say, yeah, definitively that's the overwhelming favorite. I would also not tell you that. Texas Football Channel. What's up, Texas Football Channel? Hello, John. Great content once again. Texas Football Channel, thank you very much. That's very nice of you. Love giving you guys the great content. That's what I'm here for. And I appreciate your support of the channel, my friend. Thank you for being here as always. Everybody give a shout out to Texas Football Channel. Love you showing up, my friend. Finally Tuned. What's up, Finally Tuned? Finally Tuned says, will be interesting when the sponsors are booze, weed, and gambling. And then there's also big money in big pharma and the defense industry. Yeah, I mean, if we're just throwing stuff out the window, might as well, right? Colorado could be, I'm trying to think of like I don't know what the biggest like weed brand is. Because I feel like they're all regional, right? Like I know, in Missouri, if you go to the Missouri dispensaries, it's all like Fresh Karma is like a big one around here. So I don't know what the Fresh Karma Buffaloes or whatever it would be. Gambling, I'm honestly shocked that we haven't seen more gambling seep into college athletics yet. Remember at the advent of Brett Yormark coming to the Big 12, we were talking a lot more about that then. Like, hey, this will probably be the league to embrace gambling much more than everybody else, because that is a way to squeeze out some extra revenue and relevance with that whole community, because there is a lot to be gained there. So I'm with you. And then booze. I mean, I feel like, booze is already, you're getting more booze sales at these stadiums. Booze is already a pretty big part of it. So 10 years from now could be booze, weed, gambling. You can have the Starbucks Huskies, and you can have players rolling in there that aren't even going to class, and you're just paying them the money and moving them all through. Which that is when we're really talking about like, semi-pro, your G League, whatever it is that you want to call it. That's when we would legitimately be talking about that. That does really kind of suck to think about, but if we're getting there just baby step, I mean, you're probably going to continue following your team and watching it, right? I guess my question would be, what is the last straw for you? If you're somebody who thinks like, man, that really sucks and I wouldn't watch it, what would be the last straw for you? I think that's the tricky question, because I would not be able to answer that myself. Like, what would be the last straw where I would say, hey, that's too far. I just don't care. I'm not going to watch. I don't know. I don't know what that would be. But they're probably going to really test you on that. And that's a part of what today's show has been about. But I think that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for allowing me to have fun at a concert last night, do the live show tonight instead for you. I would highly encourage you to go watch the video from yesterday with Brett Yormark's brief comments about expansion with the Arizona Board of Regents. Also just the big picture push to make everybody go all in on being competitive in football right now. I think that's a very key thing happening in the conference. I've got some good stuff for you coming up. I promise. I keep telling you, like, I've got a project that I'm working on that's going to allow us all to communicate more. That will be coming soon. Also, I have some recorded content in the can that will be coming out later this week with a national expert, probably my favorite national college football guy going right now. So you will get that content later this week as well. So there's a lot of good stuff coming. A lot of good stuff coming. And Cyclone Steve with a little buzzer beater action here. ISU has had ketchup and mustard uniforms marketing. There you go. There you go. Ketchup and mustard. Heinz, and I guess it could just be Heinz for all, right? Or like French's. Who's the big mustard? Who's the biggest mustard brand out there? Are we talking like, is it French's? Is that, I'm trying to picture my mustard bottle in the fridge right now. Anyway, you are correct, Cyclone Steve. They've even got like the charcoal uniforms. That could be like your Weber grill, charcoal uniforms when Iowa State goes with the blacks. Daniel says you forgot the best, Tony Gonzalez from Cal. Yes, as a Chiefs fan, that probably is what I should have done. I probably should have gone Tony Gonzalez. Hard for me though, much as I love Tony Gonzalez, it's hard for me to not start with Marshawn Lynch. I do love Marshawn Lynch, but shout out to Tony Gonzalez from Cal, and shout out to Daniel for reminding me of all of that. Hey, let me know in the comments if you're catching this late. Let me know in the comments all the sponsor opportunities that we have here in the Big 12 for all these different schools. Thank you, Stripes. Kingsford, yeah, Kingsford would have been better there for the charcoal. You can tell that I'm an air fryer guy these days as opposed to the grill. I don't use the grill near as much since I got an air fryer. Okay. Tell your friends, guys. I would much appreciate that. Spread the word, friends, family, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, X, Facebook groups, wherever you're at on social media. Let them know about the channel. Continue to make this community bigger and bigger. Love and appreciate all of you guys so much. If you can like the video on your way out the door, that would be great. And yes, keep the comments coming. All of that stuff helps with the engagement and the almighty algorithm. That is how you can help support me. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you didn't get a chance to be a part of the show live and you want to leave a question or comment there, you can do so with your donation there. Appreciate all of you guys. I will talk to you soon. Take care.